Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. You know, when I first started to wake up to what was going on around the world, one of the main tenets of my awakening had to do with the conspiracy that was the New World Order. And it was the topic that really birthed the truther community outside of the events of 9/11, at least online, you know, the explosion of it. There were only a handful of people prior that were really talking about the New World Order and exposing the hidden agenda of the elite. And while there are still many who continue to track the political and economic developments, many people coming from a spiritual perspective, even a religious one, while we're made aware of the topic, always needed some kind of explanation beyond just these men are evil. And when I started to discover that a lot of these elite were actively worshiping Satan and believed things that were written down decades ago, some even centuries ago, that were effectively channeled by entities, spiritual entities, everything started to make more sense, especially from where I was looking at things, which was the biblical worldview. But because of the supernatural filter by which we look at the world is so interesting and has so many different facets, I feel like topics such as the Nephilim and more recently the flat earth conspiracy has really kept us distracted and largely unaware of the global development headed by organizations like the European Union and especially the UN. Now, on one hand, from a biblical point of view, there's nothing we can do about it in terms of its progress because we know that biblically certain things are supposed to happen where effectively there will be an attempt for a global takeover of some kind. And while the political and economic arm of the New World Order has been pretty well established for many years, it was the people of religious faith and spirituality that seem to be the last ones that need to be herded, if you will. And for many of us who are conspiracy theorists and are also believers, in my case, Christian, and even if some of you guys aren't Christian, maybe you're Catholic, maybe you're Mormon, maybe you're something else, maybe even into the New Age. If you're awake, you're awake. Now, of course, in my view, the biblical worldview makes the most sense. But according to the Vatican, the Pope stands in for Christ. And while that's something that is totally against my understanding of the Bible and how a church should operate, nevertheless, Rome has been a power in its own for centuries, but it seemed to not have a cohesive front in terms of creating this New World Order system. That was until yesterday. The Pope, standing before the UN, basically gave his blessing to the 2030 Global Sustainability Agenda. And I feel like we've officially entered the final stage of creating this global institution where the religious arm, along with the political and economic, are merging to become the beast. For those who were paying attention, the Vatican had been working on such developments for a New World Order for a long time, but it was something else to see the Pope actually stand in to this level and really give blessing to an agenda that when you dig into it, is quite disturbing. Now, I know a lot of people have been looking at the 2030 thing for a while, and I had kept my eye on it, but I think it's important to express that this whole September 23rd thing was the beginning of this hard push for the New World Order system. Now, if you go to sustainabledevelopment.un.org, their own document called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, outlines what they are planning to do. Now, I'm not going to read everything for you. That would just take way too long because this is a pretty long document. But they have some main goals, 17 of them related to sustainable development, and 168 targets, which were announced today, demonstrating the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. And when you read through this, initially you're going to think, there's nothing wrong with this. These are the tenets that should be placed in order to create a better world. Things like ending poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions. Things like protecting the planet from degradation, including sustainable consumption and production, and control of our natural resources to fight against climate change, which is a huge arm of this. Things like prosperity, to ensure human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives that have economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. Now, for those of you paying attention, where have we heard in harmony with nature? That phrase. I think you know what I'm talking about. Peace. We are determined to foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, free from fear and violence. Partnership. planning to mobilize the means required to implement this agenda through a revitalized global partnership for sustainable development based on a spirit of strengthened global solidarity, focusing in particular on the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable, and with the participation of all countries, all stakeholders, and all people. You see, they're not really giving us a choice about this. And if you read between the lines, by Obama signing up for this UN Sustainable Development 2030, it is going to cause the UN to be the central government of the world. The Constitution becomes more and more obsolete. And we've seen that pattern for the last several years here, but this is another step. This is another jump. And I think people are going to be surprised at how much things are going to change once this is implemented. Now, this website here that I will link to, and I'm looking at now, has a list of 91 things, including a huge list of goals associated with several tenets of society. And again, please read through it on your own, because you will find many, many things as you read through all of this, things that will concern you, things that will trouble you. And I'm going to point out just a few things here. In their declaration section, one of the things that they mention is number 5, where it says this is an agenda of unprecedented scope and significance. It is accepted by all countries and is applicable to all, taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. These are universal goals and targets which involve the entire world, developed and developing countries alike. They are integrated and indivisible and balance the 3 dimensions of sustainable development. So, again, it sounds really pleasing, doesn't it? They want to develop the entire world to create this social order, a utopia, a balance, indivisible between the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, which are the economic, social, and environmental. Now, think about this. Economic. They're trying to create a single world economy, or at least a system that is singular in nature, where they're not separated by nation states. Social order. They're trying to create a single social order and a single environmental order. And I think with the environmental, that includes the technological aspect of it, raising technology in harmony with nature. And this is where topics like transhumanism enter the picture. And actually, transhumanism and the technological development affects all 3, the economic, social, and environmental. And that's why so many people have speculated that the mark of the beast system will be a microchip. Now, it doesn't have to be a microchip. It can be something else entirely. It can be a basic mark that shows your allegiance to the system. But it's very interesting that these are the things that are talked about. Another one that I want to point out here on the list is number 17. It's under Our World Today. Here's what it says. In its scope, however, the framework we are announcing today goes far beyond the MDG, which is the Millennium Development Goals. Alongside continuing development priorities such as poverty eradication, health, education, and food security and nutrition, it sets out a wide range of economic, social, and environmental objectives. It also promises more peaceful and inclusive societies. Now, how are they going to do this? How are they going to enforce this? That's the question. It also, crucially, defines means of implementation. Guess what? The UN gets to define how this is implemented, and they're not clear on how they're going to do this. Reflecting the integrated approach that we have decided on, there are deep interconnections and many cross-cutting elements across the new goals and targets. So it's pretty clear here. The elite of the world, through this United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development, are basically declaring themselves the rulers of the planet. I mean, think about that. Now, let me skip back to number 10 in conjunction to this. As one of their shared principles, here's what they say. The new agenda is guided by the purpose and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, including full respect for international law. It is grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights Treaties, the Millennium Declaration, and the 2005 World Summit Outcome Document. It is informed by other instruments such as the Declaration on the Right to Development. So again, this agenda is going to supersede the Constitution, at least here in the United States. And that's been happening for a while again, but this is it. We're going to start seeing the total breakdown, more so, at least in the United States. Every nation that signs up is going to be part of this agenda. And so what happens to those nations that choose not to? That's a question that I have. There's another conference in Paris in December that's going to really look at the climate change thing and the climate agreement. And this will be another thing that these elite are just deciding. And if the United States signs up, too bad, we can rebel, but we're going to be under the United Nations 2030 Global Sustainable Development Plan. This is the New World Order. It's here in more ways than you can imagine. The ending poverty thing is great. On one hand, how can you go against that thought? Of course we want to end poverty. The church has been going to nations like Africa trying to help with that poverty situation. But I heard somebody recently talk about how they were conversing with a pastor from Africa, and this pastor said, hey, you know what? Forget the food, forget the clothes. Those things are great. We appreciate that. But bring the gospel. He said, my people need the gospel, not food and clothes. Yes, yeah, we need those things too, but more importantly, we need the thing that's going to save our souls. And this is a point that I wanted to make, is that a lot of Christian churches in America, these seeker-friendly types, these, types that say they're missionary, yet, basically what they do is they go into these other nations and they help create a, local church or, local foster home or create some sort of way to get access to clean water. These are all great things. But those churches will hook, line, and sinker follow this agenda. They'll say, oh, yes, the UN will help us, in a greater capacity. And if you look at one of the goals, which is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere, in 1.4, it says that by 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land and other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. Now, again, will this really happen? I don't know. And it sounds good. Yeah, we want our own ownership and control over our land and, our own property, and we want our own inheritance and have access to our own natural resources. But what happens if you don't comply with the UN in how to do that, or under what conditions we do that? That's the question. That's the big question here. And what does it mean to create appropriate new technology and financial services? Technology that is controlled by who? For what purpose? All very important questions that I don't think we're going to have much say in, because these elite and these rulers of the UN are going to decide for us. Same thing with ending hunger. They want to 2.A, increase investment, including through enhanced international cooperation in rural infrastructure, agricultural research and extension services, technology development, and plant and livestock gene banks in order to enhance agricultural productive capacity in developing countries, in particular, least developed countries. Again, technology development and plant and livestock gene banks. Very interesting. And then education, inclusive and equitable quality education, and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. 4B, by 2020, sustainably expand globally the number of scholarships available to developing countries, in particular least developed countries, small island developed states, and African countries, for enrollment in higher education, including vocational training and information and communications technology. Why would they want to push that higher education and focus on information and communication technology? That's interesting. Technical, engineering, and scientific programs in developed countries and other developing countries. So, again, I can go on and on here. There's a lot of things in here that will jump out at you, and at first will sound like, oh, that sounds wonderful, but then you kind of think about it and you go, wait a minute, how are they going to implement this? What sorts of rules and sorts of demand are they going to have? And what happens to those who don't comply? What if they do something that you think is morally misaligned with what you believe? And now that the Pope is behind it, there's a means here to create a one world religious system. And the Pope definitely gave its blessing to this whole agenda. That's why he came. Now, let me make this last point here under technology. 17.6, enhance north to south, south to south, and triangular regional and international cooperation on and access to science, technology, and innovation, and enhance knowledge sharing on mutually agreed terms, including through improved coordination among existing mechanisms, in particular at the United Nations level, and through a global technology facilitation mechanism. A global technology facilitation mechanism. The United Nations wants to create the virtual panopticon. In essence, they want to control the technology. They want to control the facilitation of that technology and the mechanisms that are involved in it. And how are they going to do this? Through sharing on mutually agreed terms. Mutually between who? Now, in Daniel 7, plenty of Bible prophecy scholars and people that are interested in biblical prophecy have looked at the vision in Daniel 7. The four beasts. And there have been many speculations as to who that is, who these four beasts are. And a lot of people have suggested that they're nations. That's kind of the main tenet here. And it's quite possible that it isn't the nations. 3 nations come together, maybe under some sort of 2030 system or something like it in the future, and they become the final beast kingdom. Or maybe it's describing the 3 dimensions, the economic, social, and environmental arms of society. And as these sectors of society converge, it becomes the 4th beast. Daniel 7:23, and thus he said, "As for the 4th beast, there shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces." And interestingly enough, in Revelation 13, we see the same beast as the one described in Daniel 7, a beast that rises out of the sea with 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its head. A beast that's like a leopard, feet like a bear, mouth like a lion. It's a conglomerate of the 3 beasts previously described in Daniel 7. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of his heads had a mortal wound, and we've talked about this before. And when the religious arm comes in, could this be the other beast rising out of the earth, which had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon? A perfect description of the papacy and Rome. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. Now we'll just have to wait and see. Some of the tenets here, performing great signs, even making fire come down from heaven. We certainly haven't seen that. And after the wound of the first beast, the second beast will heal it somehow, perform these miracles, and that's going to cause the creation of the image of the beast, and it will implement the mark of the beast. And if you read the mark of the beast here, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Guys, go read that, and then go read the Sustainable Development document. And I think you'll see why this is such a huge turning point in our world. These are things that were prophesied, and whether it be the exact fulfillment or just the shadow of the fulfillment, we'll have to look and see. But things are changing, and our lives will change. But there's one thing that won't change, and that's the Word of God. God's kingdom will reign forever and ever. And remember that heaven and earth is going to pass away. All this stuff that's building up, it's going to pass away. But His Word, the Word of God, will not pass away. If you don't know Jesus Christ, you need to turn to Him today. You need to repent, and you need to believe that Jesus Christ died and rose again on the cross for you, because that is the only thing that's going to save us from the global tyranny that's about to take effect here in the next few months, few years, and certainly decades. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.